It was a deranged ultra-leftist extremist group. And the foreign minister that was originally appointed by the current president of Peru, Pedro Castillo, his first foreign minister said they were a CIA organization. Now, I've never heard that. I've never seen any evidence of that. But yeah, the Shining Path was this crazed, deranged peasant Jacobin, head chopping, bloodthirsty group. And people were terrified of them. And so the bourgeoisie used it to set up a military dictatorship. And they installed Fujimori as the military dictator. And then imagine being a leftist in Peru. On the one hand, you've got this crazy ultra-leftist group that goes around killing leftists. Long live Presidente Gonzalo, blah, 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 and murders trade union activists. And then, on the other hand, the government uses that to set up a fascist state, and then they kill trade union activists. So the left of Peru, as a result of what the Shining Path did, was crushed. It was just crushed. It was being attacked by ultra-leftists. It was being attacked by the government that used the fear of the ultra-leftists to set up a military dictatorship. It was awful. Socialism comes by bringing millions of people into motion and building a coalition, a popular front of labor unionists, of peasants, of workers, community organizations. It doesn't come by blowing shit up and engaging in left adventurism. And these people that have this fantasy that like the revolution happens because I organize a bunch of, poor people that are like gangsters and we get guns and we like shoot people. That's what what is his name? What is his name? I didn't even remember his name. One of these doofuses who's attacking me. It's like he thinks the lumpen proletariat are revolutionary because he's got this like gun fantasy and he wants to make everybody poor, right? He likes the lockdowns because it's making people poor and that'll like make them more revolutionary, man. It's like, this is childish thinking, has nothing to do with Marxism. This is Blanquism. This is Punchism. This is ultra leftist. You never support making life worse for the working class. And bad situations on their own don't lead to revolution. If a bad situation comes and it just makes life worse, but there's no mass proletarian organization to lead resistance, it actually just demoralizes people. Communists don't want everyone's wages to go down. Communists don't want, schools in working class neighborhoods to close. Communists don't want, the roads to start crumbling. Communists don't want life to get bad for the working class. Because if things get bad, and there's no mass movement of resistance, and there's no vanguard that can lead people in struggle, it only demoralizes things. And furthermore, left adventurism and terrorism is not how revolutions happen. Revolutions are based on working people in their millions, mobilizing, building combinations and coalitions to fight for what they want and asserting their power. And they do become violent when they have no choice. When the ruling class is looking to crush their peaceful democratic organizations, they have to defend themselves. But ultra-left adventurism has always led to what it led to in Peru, isolating the revolutionaries from the masses, enabling the capitalist state to have a huge crackdown and suppress the revolutionaries. Serious organizers and revolutionaries do not advocate left adventurism and terrorism. And the idea that we want life to get worse for the broad masses because then they'll be like violence, man. And the idea that the lumpen proletariat, the desperately poor and criminalized elements, that basically are pushed to the margins of society and are so desperately poor they'll work for anybody, that's who we should be organizing, not average working class people who want a better life. This is all just an ultra leftist deviation that serves the ultra rich, right? Louis Bonaparte, if you actually read where Karl Marx talked about the definition of the lumpen proletariat, he talked about how Louis Bonaparte built an army of desperately poor people, the Society of December 10th, to beat down the rest of the working class, to beat down his enemies in the capitalist class, and stabilize capitalism. And that's a trick that since the time of the Roman Empire, you've had this. The Gracchi brothers and others, Bonapartist figures, will mobilize the desperately poor and marginal, build an army of them to beat down the rest of society in order to stabilize capitalism. This guy hates FDR. He hates FDR. It's like basically the lumpen are utilized to do what FDR did. He stabilized capitalism with reforms. So, and FDR did a lot of good progressive stuff because he was aligning with the Soviet Union. And that again, these people, they have an analysis where it's like, is this person a communist or not? It's like these people attack me for supporting Lincoln. Well, I don't support Lincoln because I think he was a communist, but he entered an alliance with communists to defeat slavery. That was good, right? And that Lincoln represents a progressive trend. And Lincoln was very heavily influenced by Marx. And there's loads of scholarship about this. about, about August Willich and Joseph Wedemeyer and the role of Marxists in the Union Army, and how New York Tribune, the main Republican Party newspaper in New York City, hired Karl Marx as its London correspondent, and how it required a united front that the labor movement was part of, and included Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, and how it was really the defeat of slavery in the United States was the Second American Revolution. These people don't know any of that. They just know, like, I like guns, man, and I like revolution. I'm gonna like get a gun, and I'm gonna get like gangsters, and we're gonna be like revolutionary, man, and I want everyone to be poor so they can become gangsters. And I mean, it's just the stupidest crap. These people are dumb. They're overgrown teenagers. They're LARPing. Some of us are actually trying to save our country from what's happening right now. We see people in the United States who are starving, who have their relatives dying of opioids. We see the big lines outside of Catholic charities. We see the people who, I mean, capitalism is destroying America right now. And we're not going to defeat it by going, yeah, I want to be a gangster. We're going to defeat it by building real organizations, organizing the broad masses of people, building a real coalition of people, united, who don't agree on everything, to fight for economic rights. That's how we're going to win. Right? And we're going to win, and we're going to work with people we disagree with. And we're going to talk about how we don't want to make life worse in America. We want to make life better. And we are going to talk about how only socialism can save America, how imperialism is responsible. Imperialism is responsible for the crisis. The same big banks and multinational corporations that are destroying the lives of American workers are also waging wars overseas and keeping countries around the world poor. We're going to build an anti-imperialist united front among the broad masses of people. That's how it works, all right? And you want to do this, you have this fantasy that you're never actually going to do. You're just going to sit in your apartment, and you're going to sit in your home and LARP on the internet and pretend you're Presidente Gonzalo. You're never going to do anything. And you have this fantasy that you're going to, I'm going to run around with a gun, man. I'm so badass. Grow up. Like, some of us are serious about this. Some of us are building real organizations, and you're being a child, and you're LARPing. And it might be more fun on social media. And I mean, who knows? Maybe if you keep doing it and you get, better production values, you can get some sexy costumes, more people will watch you. But it's not fucking serious. It's child's play. It's stupid. It has nothing to do with real revolutionary organizing and the real Marxist movement. It's juvenile behavior. And ultimately, it serves the ultra rich, because you're helping mobilize against the working people who are trying to defend their communities from the economic downfall of the lockdowns. You're mobilizing people against Russia and supporting their war drive against Russia, demonizing Russia and China, which is exactly the same. So your LARP, your live action role play, your fantasy game where you're a gangster, you support the Lumpen, man, and you hate white workers because they're a bunch of square. This fantasy that you're doing is serving the imperialists, and it's preventing a real, broad, working class united front from actually emerging. So I'm tired of this shit. I'm really, really tired of it. I'm really tired of it. Go and watch my keynote speech. It was posted last night, very early in the AM. My keynote speech from the Center for Political Innovation Conference. In front of a statue of Lincoln, I talked about who is really harming American working people, how the future of the American working class is standing with Russia and China and Cuba and Venezuela against Wall Street, and how we're going to revive the traditions of class unity, anti-racism, anti-imperialism, working class power. We need a government of action to fight for working families against the big banks and corporations. That is the revolutionary Marxist approach. It's not your child's play. It's not your LARP. It's not your teenage fantasy. It's about building actual working class power. It's about bringing people who don't agree with each other on things like abortion and gay marriage together to stand in solidarity against the big banks and corporations, against their great reset that's driving people into poverty. It's about becoming the champions of the people, not celebrating when people get poorer, not saying, oh, I like lockdowns, it leads to wrecking the economy, that makes people poor, and then we can do gangsta shit. Shut the fuck up, right? Communists are champions of the people. Whenever a capitalist boss drives down the wages of workers, we're against it. Whenever a capitalist boss gets us into a new war, I don't care if you don't like Putin or you don't like China, we're against it. We never support the capitalists in their wars. Revolutionary defeatism means standing against your own bourgeoisie and welcoming the defeat of imperialism, of your imperialist bourgeoisie, welcoming their defeat and standing for the defeat of imperialism. I mean, these people have no idea what they're talking about. They're playing stupid, childish games. They're speaking in the name of Marxism, and it annoys the crap out of me. It really annoys the crap out of me. Go and read what Karl Marx wrote about Lincoln. Did he write, Lincoln's not a communist, so he's an idiot? No, that is not what Lincoln wrote, or that's not what Marx wrote about Lincoln. Marx wrote that Lincoln was the single-minded son of the working class, rescuing an enchained race. He wrote about how the coalition to defeat the slaveholders included the working men of Europe who refused to pick cotton from that was picked by slaves. That the working men of Europe, if they brought a delivery of cotton to their textile mill that came from the South, the workers of London, who were organized by Karl Marx, would refuse to unload it and refuse to work with it in this textile mill because they said that would be scabbing on the black people of America that want to be free. They organized workers in London to refuse to work with cotton that was picked by slaves. That is solidarity as part of a coalition to defeat the slaveholders. And it was an amazing moment when Lincoln came together and he brought the labor unions and the Marxists and August Willich and Joseph Wedemeyer, who really had guns and really built a working class union, the Ohio 9th Infantry Regiment, a communist division of the Union Army. And he brought together Harriet Tubman, a real badass, a fighter for black people who went around South Carolina raiding the slave plantations, freeing slaves. And he brought together Frederick Douglass, and he brought together small farmers who didn't like the big plantation owners of the South, the free soilers, and he brought together abolitionists like John Brown and revolutionary Christians who thought slavery was against the Bible. And Abraham Lincoln built this amazing united front, and they kicked the ass of the slaveholders. And Abraham Lincoln, at first, he didn't even want to abolish slavery. He didn't want to. At first, he was saying, I just want to preserve the Union. I just don't want slavery to expand. But the class forces forced Abraham Lincoln to abolish slavery. In order to win the war, he had to move toward abolishing slavery. He was forced by history, by material conditions, to abolish slavery. And Abraham Lincoln, even though he was reluctant to do it, even though he didn't want to, he ended up presiding over the Second American Revolution. You go read W.E.B. Du Bois, the great Marxist scholar, and what he said about Black Reconstruction. And go read about what happened and how the defeat of slavery, where Abraham Lincoln led a class collaborationist united front against the British Empire and their free trade system that was holding back development and trying to keep the barbaric system of slavery in the South. You go and read about how Marxists played an amazing role in defeating that and defeating slavery, defeating the British Empire that was backing the slave traders, how the Russians sent their navy to the harbors of New York. Read about that, about how there was fear that the British would send their military to the South to support the southern slave owners. So the Russians sent their navy to New York City harbor to protect New York City and say, if the British get involved, we're getting involved. And that scared the British out of getting involved because the Russians stood with Abraham Lincoln. You have no idea about any of this. You're just like, Lincoln is an American president. He's on the $5 bill. So therefore, anyone who talks about him is a racist. You don't know what you're talking about. Study actual Marxism. Go and read what Marx wrote in the New York Tribune. Go and read what was written by W.E.B. Du Bois. Go and read William Z. Foster and his history of the communist movement in the United States. Go and read the history of the three internationals. Go and understand how revolutions happen and how the defeat of slavery was a progressive step forward. And that side of the American people, the John Brown, Harriet Tubman, abolitionists, Joseph Wedemeyer, August Willich, Frederick Douglass, that progressive side of the American people who stood against the British Empire, stood against free trade, built a coalition, that's what we're trying to bring back. We are the real patriots. We love America. We love America so much that we're willing to say that the enemy of the American people isn't in Russia, isn't in China, it's on Wall Street. Then if you really love America's working families, you've got to be a communist. You've got to be an anti-imperialist. You got to want to dismantle this system of profits in command and production organized for profit. You got to want the economy to be reorganized to serve the people. That is our understanding, and it's based in scientific Marxism, for goddamn sake. Learn something. Stop this teenage LARPing crap. Seriously, get over it and grow the fuck up. All right.